It's very frustrating, and there's no real end to this now. And that's literally 38 minutes ago when I started this
This
topic
you don't
rolling.
Even have notes, Patrick. You don't have to have a list of stuff to talk about.
That
we're good.
In the Midwest, you know the best is there waiting, so come and join the conversation. Eisner approved, fan and artist and creator too. This is how the challengers do. What? Keep the conversation moving along. Keep reading comics, keep your local store strong. If it's hard, then it's a job for the challengers. What? Comics and conversation, y'all.
From Challengers Comics and Conversation in Chicago, this is Contest of Challengers, a comics industry business podcast with
Patrick Brower.
Patrick Brower.
Patrick Brower.
Patrick Brower.
Patrick Brower.
Patrick Brower.
Patrick Brower and W. Dal Bush.
W. Dal Bush.
Dal Bush.
Dal Bush.
Dal.
Dal.
W. Dal Bush.
we bill this as a comics industry business podcast.
Yep.
And we rank it under business categories. Now, it is true that a lot of the things we talk about are instrumental in how we run our business. But I do think that from people that listen to business podcasts regularly, this is probably not the content they're looking for.
No, mostly because we're terrible businessmen.
Right.
Consistently and reliably.
So my first topic today, which is ironic because I just showed you an entirely blank piece of paper.
You can have it in your brain, though.
I do have it in my brain paper, is something that I am learning that I'm very bad at. And, you know, it's as
Is it saying Starks instead of Sparks?
Starks.
You did it.
Quiz me.
Say Starks.
Starks.
Oh my God, twice in a row.
Robin Sparkles.
Oh.
Billy Starks. Ricky Saints. Kyle Starks.
Okay, very good.
Ricky Sharks.
Ricky Smarks.
Ricky Smarks. Kyle Starks.
Nice.
Star Trek. Star Wars. That's not the point. The point is
Anyway.
I get them confused.
You do.
Not I say them wrong.
Okay.
Ricky Saints. Thumbs down.
Thumbs down.
You know, we adapt to business changes as they come. And
Sure.
this week was our taxes got done for the business. And we're on our third accountant. We've talked about our accountancy issues in the past. There's no issues now. That's what I'm saying. There was a point this time where our accountant was looking for something, and I handed her a sheet, and she looked at it and said, I like you. Because I'd broken everything down to the penny.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, all I need, like on this whole page where you did all this work, I just need this number.
Yeah, this
But you
grand
gave
total
me this number.
is right here.
Yeah. And it was for the Ireland deductions.
Nice. Yeah, so I mean, for people who don't know, we had a long period of having a bad accountant, and then we had a very brief period of having a terrible accountant, and now we have a very good accountant.
The bad accountant, he wasn't a bad accountant.
We only found out afterwards that he was bad.
An old
is the
accountant.
thing. Like, we thought we had a good accountant, and then we had a terrible one, and then once we got an actual good accountant, we were like, oh, even the good one was bad. Oh, okay, got it.
It was always a very high-stress situation going to get our taxes done with our original accountant.
Mm-hmm.
And the office was pin drop quiet. Former smoker, and you could tell the office, like, it didn't smoke anymore,
but for decades had.
we always told the story where he'd call me up and ask for something, and I said, I'll email it over. And he said, no, just fax it. And I said, Don, we don't have a fax machine. He's like, it's 20 whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Get a fax machine, buddy.
It's 20-something, which is why we don't have a fax machine, buddy. We just scan it and email it like everybody.
I wish I knew that. If they could say, like, it's 2012, get us fax machine, buddy. No, it's 2012. Fax machines are outmoded.
Yeah. That was one of the things that when we were starting Challengers, we had come over from a place that, you know, every store had a fax machine, and to communicate with one store in the chain or another, you'd fax a sheet of paper or whatever. And so when we were starting Challengers, we were like, I guess we need to get a fax machine. And then very quickly we were like,
no.
Why? What? No, we don't need a fax machine. We don't need a second phone line for the fax machine. Who will we be faxing? Nobody. When
we had to deal with all those fax machines in the past, and being somebody who would go on the let's buy a new fax machine for this store trip, it was always often like, can we buy the floor model situation?
Sure.
So that always meant like none of them were the same kind.
Right.
So nobody knew how anybody else's worked.
Yep.
Frequently didn't come with
Toner.
manuals.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, and it was always a stressful thing going to our accountant because he always had a million questions, and he was very like itemized deductions, all this stuff, and he's the one who shaped the way I record all of our finances.
Right. Because after a couple of years of I will need these numbers, you would then realize, oh, if I kept those numbers all year round, this is all ready to go.
Yeah. And then when we were looking to move on, we took the advice of some creators who used a specific accountancy group. These guys were just bros and would constantly file late, and we get hit with all these fees.
Yeah, I think the year that they filed ridiculously late after we had given them the information well in advance of the filing deadline, and we found out that we were on the hook for a sizable amount of financial penalties because they had not filed.
Which people listening will say, well, you just make them pay it.
How do you make them pay that? How do you do that?
Also,
I'm not suing them because this is like, it's a lot of money for us to have to pay for something we weren't responsible for, but in the scheme of things, it was not a crazy amount of money. It's not like we were penalized like $100,000, and then it's like, well, we're definitely not paying that.
So, quick quiz: when are individual taxes due in the year?
April 15th.
When are business taxes due?
Isn't it different times based
March
on
15th?
Is it March 15th? Okay.
So this particular year, which was the year 2020, was when they kept having to ask for continuances and changes. We got them all I always turn my stuff in early, like end of January, early February. End of January is when all the businesses, all the people you work with need to get you all the proper paperwork.
Right. And like we do our in-store inventory, that's done by the first week of January.
Yeah.
Like by January 7th, that thing is locked down and ready to go.
As is all of the previous year's totals and whatnot.
So all that stuff, we make sure that because again, we had dealt with other accountants before, and it was like our first accountant was very like slammed all the time, as you would assume a lot of accountants are around tax filing time. So we wanted to make sure that like we got in when we could.
Yeah.
So he would have all the time he needed to do it.
Like now, cutting to now. Also, taxes was not the first topic on my list.
Too late.
Anyway, now I will, toward the end of the year, I will schedule our tax time so I could have my pick of days and times, usually mid-February.
Right. Just a good time to get it.
Yeah. So we have all the paperwork, but we're well in advance of the deadline.
Yeah. And our accountant is not super duper slammed.
She would be if we'd only started like February 1st. What do you have available? They'd
Right,
be
of
like,
course.
you're boned.
Yeah.
So, I pick it well in advance, so we're ready for it. I lost my thread.
You were saying that they were total bros?
Oh, yeah. So, right. Yes, the world shut down, but not until after the deadline had hit for businesses.
Yeah.
It wasn't until late March that the city shut down.
Yeah. So they had all the time they needed in February and early March to get
They
this stuff in.
didn't file until late September.
Yes. And at that point, we were well past the, like, we'll just get a little extension. Like, oh no, like we were well past that, and it cost us a bunch
to
of
the
money.
point of that, there's nothing else we did in that time period.
Right.
Like they would frequently call and say, we need this. And I'm like, you already have it. I've already sent it.
Yeah.
Then they'd find it.
Literally nothing required us to do anything other than just wait for them to do their job. So that was the last year we used them. And then a friend of yours had suggested their accountant, and we tried them out and went, oh, this is, not only are they super good at what they do, but it's also fast.
Yeah. And they're a huge nerd.
Yeah.
But I think one of the reasons that they're fast is that there's a lot of specifics they may not get into. Like there is a lot of, I'm just going to say, extraneous information I give them that winds up not being used.
Okay.
But I mean, I would rather do it. And I finally remembered the question I had from last year that I forgot to ask last year.
Yeah.
And they're difficult to get a hold of during the year for non-emergency things.
Yeah. Like when we have an appointment, they're focused on what we need them to do, and it's all very good. But if at any point in the year we're like, oh, for a completely separate thing, we need a piece of information they have, it's like, that is probably going to take 72 hours to several weeks.
Several weeks just to
to get them to acknowledge that you asked for something. And then once they do it, it's like, that'll take a couple hours. And it's like, so it is weeks to get to be like, acknowledge us.
I mean, it's almost worth setting up an appointment,
right?
Just so you know you have the time. But then I feel bad because they don't charge by the hour; they charge by what they do.
The task, yeah.
And answering questions is like whatever.
Right.
But the question is this: for the entirety of my career in comic book retail, and thus yours as well, we have not in Illinois been charging sales tax on individual single issues of comics.
Right.
Because they're considered dated periodicals, which is a magazine,
a newspaper,
right. Meaning they have a shelf life.
Right.
Like they're disposable.
Yeah, they expire at a certain point.
Yeah.
That's why, I mean, to do a quick sidebar, when you look at old comics and it might say, you know, March or something on the cover, and then you would look at the indicia and it would say, you know, March 1986. But if you ever looked up online, you'd see the thing was actually published in January of 1989. The reason why the date would say March is because that was when grocery stores, convenience stores, newsstands would pull the book off the shelf. It would be 2 months was its freshness date.
Yeah.
And then when it would say March, they would pull it. And then it would be pulped, returned, whatever.
Just cover stripped off.
Yeah. Disposed of, because again, much like a magazine or newspaper, it had a certain shelf life to it.
So in Illinois, those aren't taxed. Now, the second you put it in a back issue box, it becomes collectible.
Correct.
Collectibles are taxed.
Right.
So
I remember working at a shop 20 years ago where that happened, like during that process where we were informed, like, you have to start charging sales tax on back issues.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
It was right before a biannual store-wide sale. I remember being like, should we make a sign to let people know that suddenly, like, these things are going to cost, like, you know, 7 or 8% more? And I was told, no, don't bother. And so I didn't. Okay. Felt a little gross, but whatever.
The only things that are not taxed at Challengers are single issue comic books and the bag tax.
True. The bag tax is not.
You can't tax a tax, apparently. Now, though, just single issue comics wind up being, at any given point, 40 to 50% of our sales.
Sure.
If not more.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure. I'm like, look, we've always just been told this. I've never seen a statute or
investigated it in the tax code to see if that's accurate. Because, I mean, as someone who's had to once or twice send out something internationally, just going through custom stuff to figure out, like, what am I saying this is? What category is this? What rate is it supposed to be under? What is the code for it? Is so perplexing and frustrating that it's like, oh, this is why we don't sell internationally. So the idea of going through something like the tax code is like, I wouldn't even know where to start.
Right. So I wanted to make sure that was the law. And I understand that an income tax accountant is not an accountant.
Correct.
Like, I don't know that our accountant does payroll or, you know, other accounting services.
Tax collection, basically.
Yeah.
They know how to file your income tax, but they don't.
I don't know
what you're supposed
and maybe
to be collecting.
They do. I've never asked. But anyway, excuse me. So I said, you know, is this still the case? You know, are we
in compliance?
Yeah. And she's like, sure.
Thank you. On the record.
Very much in a way that said, sounds right.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know this for a fact, but I don't see why it wouldn't be.
You'll know if the state sues you.
Yeah. And honestly, that is how I respond to most of what she does for us. When I'm like, well, I thought it would go a different way, but if this is what she says, that's what I'm going to do.
Right.
Like, oh, should we have one of the things that we used to do with our previous accountant was anytime we marked something down, we'd have to record that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, if
the price had depreciated in any way, the value of it depreciated.
These books from full price to 25% off, record that loss.
Right. The $3.99 that goes into the $1.99 back issues.
Record that loss. And we did that for years.
Yeah.
And our current accountant's like, no, we don't need it.
Nope.
Great. Less paperwork for us.
Yeah.
And it's true that I do, like there's less work that I do financially, which I prefer it that way.
Sure.
So, yeah. Yes. So taxes were done this week. We did owe $70 to the state.
As a business.
Yeah. So there's that. So prices are going up.
Yep. Everyone's getting charged $70 more per transaction.
Just to make it balance out.
Yeah.
But no, the real aspect of the business I was going to talk about, and it's something that I guarantee you other adults who either own businesses or know about business are going to hear me talk about the subject matter and say, you're dumb. It's so easy to do. Why is this? It's like perplexing you.
Canadian Destroyer is a day one wrestling move.
Exactly. And it is the way in which we pay our vendors. Vendors being anybody we give money to have product on our shelves.
Yeah. That's suppliers like Penguin Random House or Lunar or Diamond. It could be individual creators that we
buy stuff
from.
Yeah.
Places that we've gotten bags and boards and boxes from, all that stuff.
So there's, a dozen ways to pay people. You can write them a check. I know it's archaic, but it's still a service.
Yeah, some people want it for record keeping purposes.
You can pay them electronically via PayPal or Zelle, or they have a service like Square.
Yeah, which is usually what we do if we buy from like local creators and stuff. We don't want to hand Rachel Bard a huge wad of cash, so it's easier for us just to pay a digital invoice that she sends us, or just message her the money, and then we have a record of it too.
But for local creators, it's what do you prefer?
Right.
We'll make it easier for them.
And I mean,
some people don't want a record.
Yeah, and if we're talking about something where it's like someone sells us $40 worth of books, it's just going to be like, here's $40 cash, and we'll make a note of the fact that we paid you, and you can deal with your end of it on your end of it.
The bigger companies that we deal with all have their own ways.
It used to be that we would just deal with Diamond. Once upon a time.
Yeah, but I mean, I was going to start with Southern Hobby.
Okay.
Southern Hobby was, it took we used to hand them a check when they would drop off.
Because to then talk about Southern Hobby for a second, it used to be with Southern Hobby, the reason we'd gone with them is because they were a local games and supply distributor, and they would just have a truck route, and you could be on the truck route, and they would pick a day of the week that you'd be on the route. So every Thursday we were on the route. So Wednesday you would talk to your rep at the Southern Hobby Warehouse where they were situated and say, okay, we need 2 bundles of Golden Age boards. That means 200 individual boards in 2 shrink wrap packages, not 2 cases. We need so many boxes. We need Pokemon cards. We need the D&D book, whatever. And they would just throw it in the truck and they would just get dropped off.
But they tell us ahead of time how much the total was.
And so
we have a check ready.
Here's a check, and you hand the driver the check. And that's it. That was how payment would work.
But then they started doing a thing where they would charge you for using a check. And for the longest time, we could not get out of that. We want to do a different thing. We want to do another payment way to do it.
Yeah.
And, we don't use credit cards for that stuff. So we wanted to get on their ACH system, which is Automated Clearinghouse, which is a service where the money is taken from your account and sent to theirs, but it's cleared, meaning it's good. It's not going to bounce. The money is there.
Yeah, I mean, the clearinghouse aspect is basically just an intermediary who's like, we have the money and now we're going to give it to this other person. Yeah. So it's not your bank and this other person's bank. It's like the money goes through something else.
And it took forever to set it up, but we set it up with them. But what it is they set it up, and when it is time for us to pay them, they initiate the transfer on their end and it comes out of our bank, which I'm sure there's a lot of businesses that are not comfortable with that type of a situation.
Sure.
Because we don't necessarily have control over it. It's not as if they call and say, hey, we're going to take this much today. We just find out when it's taken.
Right.
Some things get auto shipped without us even being told they're coming.
Right.
So sometimes it's a surprise.
Yes.
I get it. but we wanted to be on their ACH system so they'd stop
So
penalizing us.
paying the stupid fee
Yeah.
to hand them a check, which was insane.
Everybody else, not counting, well, okay, so a lot of the other ones, we would do debit cards.
Yeah, or like, I mean, I was going to talk about Diamond for a second because Diamond was a very long, dumb process. For the longest time with Diamond, you were COD check. You go to pick up your books at the warehouse, and you need to have a check made out to Diamond comic
Distributors.
and that would be how you got your books. Like, you didn't have terms, you didn't have credit, you didn't have anything. You did a check, and it could be a personal check. It might need to be a certified check.
Yeah, if you were a new account and you don't have a history of paying them,
Mhm.
and they don't trust you yet, you'd have to get a certified check
Right.
or what's the other word for it?
Cashier's check.
A cashier's check. Yeah. So you get your total, go to your bank, have them
The bank
issue
cuts
this
you
check
a
saying
check.
this check is good.
Yeah, this is, for people who don't have to deal with this, a certified check or a cashier's check is basically the bank more or less taking the money out of your account right then, and then the bank is making a check for your client. So the bank is basically the one paying them at that point because you've given the bank that money.
Yep.
Instead of a normal check where it gets deposited, taken off of your account, and it could bounce, it could be overdrawn, it could be whatever. We desperately wanted terms with Diamond for years because just the process of doing the check is a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And Diamond, for years, was incredibly difficult to get terms with. Everything, they really wanted to only do COD check. Like, that was it. So eventually, like, they finally caved, I think. I don't remember exactly when it happened, but they started allowing more stores to get terms. But
Yeah,
even
we
the
got
terms
7-day terms.
terms were super, super limited. So you could pick up your books, but before next week's books came out, you needed to pay for them somehow.
Yeah.
So this wasn't even like
And at that point, it's just
30 or
easier to
what a
give
lot
them
of
a check.
businesses are used to. This is just, you have a week to pay us. And it's like, well, this, again, not huge, not great. But it meant, for the most part, you didn't need to go to the bank to get a check or remember to write out a check every time you went to the, hub to pick up your books. Or for a lot of people who were getting UPS, you would need to have a COD check. So like UPS would drop the boxes off and they needed to get a check from you. And if you didn't give them a check, those boxes went back on the truck and they took them away. So not having to deal with that by having even 7-day terms was something. Yeah, not super surprising that a lot of stores are now really enjoying working with other distributors.
So
or generous terms.
Eventually Diamond created their own online payment system.
Yes.
Which is...
And this is like within the last 6 or 7 years?
Yeah. But I mean, it's a good system because it shows you Diamond is one of those distributors where regardless of how many transactions you have during the week, how many reorders you place, how many orders you have, they would still put everything together on one weekly invoice.
Right.
So for the month, you have 4 invoices.
Yeah, it's super easy to know what you're paying each week and where it's all going, except for obviously shipping, which is a number that they come up with on their own and you can never figure out.
Right. But I mean, you go into the online payment portal and it's like, all right, here's the invoice for this week. Here's what you owe. And once you've set up your bank account information in it, you click it, and then a day or two later, the money comes out of your account. They're paid.
Right.
Right. Now, to me, that's kind of the goal.
Sure. Real simple.
Yeah.
Real transparent.
And now if we go to Lunar, Lunar is basically the same. Lunar also accepts PayPal. You could have set up a PayPal account to pay. Yeah. Which we did a few times.
Okay.
And we've got a couple of different payment options. So when I'm paying Lunar, it's like, hey, do you want to go out of your main account? Or like we've got 2 different bank accounts listed, or you can do PayPal. Right?
Sure.
So in Lunar is it's almost the same as Diamond in regard that it's usually for us 2 invoices a week, a reorder and the main order.
Right.
And again, it is when you go to the page that shows all of your invoices, it's a little like there's a lot. Like I can't tell what is, but when you click pay, it only brings up the ones you currently owe.
Yeah.
So it drops everything else off. And like even if it's when it's pending, it'll just show that it's 0. So it's, to me, as good of a system because it's just a couple of button clicks.
Right.
Right? Now, Ingram. When we order from Ingram, who's always a last resort retailer just because their discounts are the worst.
Yeah, I mean, they're a wholesaler, not a distributor, so what we're paying is not as good of a discount as if we ordered direct from any publisher. But the advantage is we can order stuff that we don't have direct accounts with, and we can order from stuff that we could have direct accounts with, but we don't order enough to hit their minimums. So it's publishers where it's like we just get, 3 or 4 books a month from them.
Yeah.
So it's just easier to get them from Ingram at a lower discount than have to do one order every 8 months that hits some distributors' minimum.
And Ingram is also our fastest distributor.
Yeah.
Like the order you placed tomorrow or yesterday will probably be in tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's also massive.
It is. We talked about why.
Yeah, when we did, but also I don't think I realized how much it was, or I may have asked you not to do it.
Okay.
But they have a debit card on file.
Mm-hmm.
So when we place an order, and it could be a credit card. We choose to not use credit cards for any of our merchants, any of our vendors. So that money is immediately deducted from our account. Great. It's already paid for.
Sure.
Love it. Hachette used to be a lot more involved.
Yeah.
It was, you'd place an order, but then you'd have to call them to pay for it.
Yeah. Basically, we didn't have terms with them yet because we used them so sparingly that it was easier to set up an account with just like, we'll just pay with a credit card, which is what we would do with a lot of smaller accounts where it's not worth going through all of the credit application
process.
process.
To be fair, we didn't try to get terms.
Right. Yeah. Again, it was really just based on how rarely we use them. But honestly, with a lot of the stuff that Diamond was going through at the end of 2024, we were like, we should shift more of the stuff to Hachette that Hachette has access to. So we got terms with them. But before that,
we found out there were months worth of product that had come out that we'd ordered from Diamond.
Basically, we found out that Diamond was in arrears with Hachette, which means stuff like Abrams and Young Press, they had not been getting, and we had not been notified of that.
Right.
So suddenly it was like, oh, there's several months worth of things that we need to get now, and we should probably start pre-ordering all of the other stuff from those publishers from Hachette. And the problem was, Hachette, we were just doing a credit card, but they don't keep a credit card on file like someone like Ingram. You have to call them in with it. So we would place an order, and then within 36 hours, we would get a pro forma invoice from Hachette saying, okay, here is what we are ready to ship out. This is the total. And then I would have to call in Hachette and say, okay, I want to pay on a pro forma invoice. And I would have to read out my credit card number and give them all of the address information and everything else because they didn't keep anything on file. So that made us use Hachette even less because it's like, this is a pain in the ass. Like from day one, I'm like, can I just give you a credit card to keep on file and you guys just charge it when it's ready to go? No, they don't have a system for that.
But wouldn't they, when there's like 1 or 2 pieces or a replacement or something, they would charge? Or because we'd always get these emails like, hey, this card isn't good.
Yeah, well, I never understood a lot of that because basically it sounded
the card was always good.
Well, it sounded like what they would do is if something wasn't ready to go on that order, they would kind of charge you for the whole order, but then they wouldn't charge you for the stuff that wasn't going to go out. And then when the stuff was ready to go out, they would just charge you for it then based on the information in the system, which I think there were some times where it was like the credit card company basically thought it was a fraudulent charge. They didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, well, you didn't tell us in advance. Or we would sometimes use the PayPal account for that. And the PayPal account might have been tapped out because we weren't expecting to use it. So there was no money in there. So they would then try to charge it. And it's like, well, you didn't tell us you were going to be charging this. And yeah, there's not that amount in there. I have to put money in there because we don't just keep a balance in our PayPal account for the store. That's not how it works. But yeah, we were able to then, after some effort on Patrick's part, finally get terms. So now with Hachette, it's a lot simpler because we are just on a billing cycle with them where they will, every month send us an invoice saying,
they send us a statement every month that says, here's what you're going to owe. And the way payment works for them, and is basically the way that we were paying at Random House and Simon & Schuster, was having our bank, PNC, send them a check.
Mm-hmm.
Paying at Random House, Simon & Schuster, we could send checks ourselves, or we could have the bank do it.
Right.
Now, the problem with having our bank, send checks out is because for my personal life, I use PNC as well. Mm-hmm. And if I want to pay a gas bill or electric bill, those are well-established companies that PNC has relationships with. So when you set up bill pay, it's like, oh, People's Gas, we have them. We know we already have all the information.
Yeah.
We'll just send your money to them.
Yeah, you just give us your account number,
yeah.
and then the check is fine.
But they don't have Penguin Random House or Simon & Schuster.
Right. These aren't places that a lot of their clients are paying bills on.
Right. So we have to set up by hand and put all the information in. And because they don't have a relationship with them, they physically cut and mail a check.
Mm-hmm.
That takes up to 2 weeks for the check to get to our vendors.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a long time.
Yep.
Especially when you're getting product from these people multiple times a week. Now, we've talked ad nauseum about how the Penguin and of the same thing for Simon & Schuster, their invoicing is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so hard to understand. It's virtually impenetrable. And sending the money is a situation where you send it and then the invoices, the statements they send every month, which have, 65 line items, not 65 items. 65.
No, like basically purchase orders, like as many orders as you've placed. And it's like, that could be a week's FOC, that could be a week's shipment, that could be
a reorder from 6 months ago. They just got back in stock.
Right. It could be multiple shipments off of one purchase order based on when stuff was going out. It could be a single goddamn comic book.
Yeah.
That was a replacement that they credited you for. Like, all of this stuff is insane. It is. And then they also have a huge future dated section where it's like, oh, here's the orders you've placed. But it's like, okay, well, that's all FOC stuff that could be coming out anywhere between like 1 and 10 weeks from now.
But that's an order on our system.
But you
so it's,
owe it. But like, you haven't shipped anything.
You will owe it.
Yeah.
Here's what you will owe.
The future dating is insane. And God bless the people who have enough money to just pay all the future dated stuff as soon as it comes in. I long to
That's
be.
the goal. That is the goal.
I long to be a company that has that much money and is doing that well, where it's like, oh, I can just pay for it as soon as I order it instead of waiting for it to come in.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, one of the things I loved about paying Diamond was we paid for this week's books when we get them.
Mm-hmm.
So when we sell them, we make that money back. We're not needing to sell them to pay for them next week.
Right. Which is more stressful.
Right. But I kind of hate having to send the checks, and it takes up to a couple of weeks. And occasionally I would be like, oh, it's early. Because what I was going to say is that I try to get everything paid for the month by the end of the month, of course, right?
Sure.
But just because I send it doesn't mean they get it in that time period.
Right.
So sometimes there'll be a statement that says, hey, you're outside your terms. Like, we're not, though. The money was sent, you didn't get it.
Right.
So then it became a monthly email to our credit rep. Here's the dates of the payments that I've
Here's
sent.
the check numbers that I sent and the amounts that therefore that
And
you
then
haven't gotten yet.
I started to realize, like, okay, well, because it takes 2 weeks to send a check through the bank, I'm just going to send a check in the mail, right?
Right.
It should only take a couple of days, especially since it's only going to Palatine.
Yeah.
It's not that far away.
Yeah, it shouldn't take more than a couple of business days.
And sometimes, 4 days later, it's cashed. Great. Sometimes it never gets cashed.
Mm-hmm.
So I was talking to our credit rep this week. I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And she said, yeah, USPS has become increasingly unreliable. There are numerous times checks just go missing or show up months later.
That's not good.
So I'm like, look, I sent a check out the January 24th. You haven't gotten it yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to stop payment on it. And do you have a different system?
Right. There's got to be a better way.
He's like, well, we're working on a payment portal. I'm like, yeah, but you've been working on that for 4 years now. And she said, you can pay us via ACH.
Okay.
Like, all right, let's set that up. It's not something we do regularly, but let's figure this out. She's like, well, here's the thing. I'll give you the information. You have to do it. You have to initiate the payment. You have to do everything comes from your end. So we don't have any access to your accounts or any of that kind of stuff.
Would you prefer?
Fine. But most banks just don't let you send electronic transfers as part of your service.
Mm-hmm.
Ours definitely didn't.
Right.
So that became an investigation like, oh, there's a system they use called Pinnacle. Okay, how do you sign up for this? You can't sign up online. You physically have to go to the bank to sign up for it.
And you had a really fun phone call with somebody
Yeah.
trying to figure that out because you're online and you're like, all right, let me Pinnacle.
Yeah, like whenever you go to sign up for a new bank account or something, or log in, it'll be like, click here to log in, and you go to the login. It's like, oh, do you want to set up an account or log in? There was no set up an account.
Yeah, and they were like part of the login process. You were like, well, I guess this is logging in like PNC, but then there was a field, and it was like company number.
Yeah. Company ID number.
Yeah, you're like company ID number. I don't know what that is. I don't know what our company. It's not the account number. It's something else. So you had called up and talked to just a customer service person. And the funniest thing, I'm doing something else, and I hear you like basically trying to explain the situation, and I can hear you starting to get frustrated because I know that tone of voice because I've experienced that tone of voice
regularly.
But there's a point where you go, we're just a small store. We don't have a sales department because this person.
She's like, you need to talk to someone in your sales team.
Yeah, like we don't have a sales team.
What does that even? What do you mean the sales team? Well, who set up your bank account? Like whoever helped you set up the bank account. What do you mean help me set it up? I did it.
Yeah.
No, who set it up for you? No, I did.
Like a banker at PNC when we said we need a bank account.
Yeah. And I got all like the numbers. So I'm still not sure if Pinnacle is a subsidiary of PNC or a separate thing. But the Pinnacle website I was on was all PNC branded.
Yeah. So that was a lot of no help. It was a lot of
basically it's like you got to go to your bank.
Yeah.
Yeah, just say that.
Yeah.
Just say you can't sign up online.
Yeah. Fine. Easy.
So I go to the bank and I'm making a deposit and getting some change. And I'm like, hey, can you do an electronic transfer as well? Because I wanted to get the ball rolling.
Right.
She's like, no, you need to go to a banker.
Okay.
Now, there was the greeter, because the bank was dead.
Sure, middle of the day.
I was the only person there.
Yeah.
The greeter had heard me say that I needed a transfer. So as soon as I finished my deposit, and I turned around, he's like, oh, and so is already ready for you. You can go talk to her. Like,
Great.
all right, great. So I go sit down and I'm like, hey, I'm interested in setting up a
electronic
like a Pinnacle account or whatever it is. And she goes, oh, well, for that, you need to talk to the store manager. The greeter, who was at the desk right next to her, he's like, yeah, just come right over here.
Hello. Why are we going different places?
Why didn't I just... So we didn't join Pinnacle because Pinnacle is for a much bigger company that has much more...
That has a sales team.
Yeah, that has many more transactions going out.
Yes.
So what we have is, it is a pay service. We are paying a monthly fee for this.
Sure.
And there's also...
I would have been shocked if we weren't paying somebody for this privilege.
And there's also a per transaction fee as well.
Ugh.
The per transaction fee, regardless of the amount, 50 cents.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Because he's like, well, how many...
Well, now we have to raise all of our prices for our customers $70.50.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Jesus.
So it's very frustrating, and there's no real end to this now. And that's literally 38 minutes ago when I started this
topic
rolling.
You don't have notes, Patrick. You don't have to have a list of stuff to talk about. We're good.
Since I'm like, all right, well, we're going to start using ACH to pay these. I'm like, you know what? It's not just going to be Penguin. It's going to be Simon & Schuster. It's going to be Hachette.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've talked to all of them in the last day to get all that information.
Just unify all that stuff. The more you can have just one process to have to deal with, the better.
Well, so the manager brings up our account. Mm-hmm. He's like, and he's showing me where to click, and I'm taking notes, right?
Uh-huh.
And then we get to the point, he's like, wait, no, all those are wrong.
What?
So I had to cross off in my notes every step I had just done. Wait, no, you go here, and then you add the vendor and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, there's video tutorials, which are not helpful.
No, they never are.
And he's like, look, the first time you set it up, it's going to take like 15 minutes. But from there on, it's just like, a
drop-down menu where you're just like these people.
2 minutes. So what it is it's not just, you don't just say, I'm paying PRH $5,000. Mm-hmm. You have to create a bill in the system.
Okay.
So you say a bill like,
I owe Penguin Random House $5,000.
And I'm going to send it on this day, and they need to get it by this day. I'm like, I want them to get it as soon as they can get it. But it still takes like 5 business days for an ACH transfer to go through.
Yeah.
which is
that sucks.
Yeah, but better than 2 weeks.
Right.
Right.
And 2 weeks to never.
Yeah, but everything now needs like, oh well, what's your invoice number?
Mhm.
What is, and so it's.
I was honestly afraid that you were going to say that you had talked to the bank manager and he was going through it and setting everything up, and then went, wait a second, you're not charging tax on comics? Oh God, what? Is that bad?
I mean, look, if we have to start charging tax on comics, fine, we'll do it.
Yeah, of course.
But if we have to,
Yeah, it's
pay the tax,
17 years worth.
yeah, goodbye challengers.
Uh-huh.
So,
Mayor Brandon Johnson's comic shop now.
and it's not as easy. Like, so if it's a company that's not in their system, for example, Penguin Random House, not in their system.
Shocker.
Weirdly, Simon & Schuster, smaller distributor, is.
Huh.
You have to set them up, and I got everything I needed from PRH, and they had sent me a secure
Token?
email where I had to create an account on the site just to download this information.
That's cool.
Which I then just had printed out on a sheet of paper, and I was waving around. I'm like, look, this is secure information. So it's not as easy as just setting it up. Once you try to connect to a vendor, they have to approve it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Penguin Random House made a point of saying, you're doing all of this on your end. We don't take money from you. We don't have access to your accounts. You have to send it at every point.
Right.
Well, it's like when you are paying for gas at the pump
Mhm.
and you put a card in, there's always that $1 test charge to make sure your card is good.
Mhm.
You know, that money winds up not coming out of your account, but they test it.
Right.
So to connect to a vendor, the PNC system sends them a tiny charge.
Yeah, like a verification.
And they have to verify it.
Yeah.
Now, all this was started yesterday.
Mhm.
So the verification process hasn't been completed.
Sure.
So I still haven't paid them from that canceled check.
Mm-hmm.
And when I checked this morning, it's like, oh, well, they'll get their verification sometime on the 20th.
Great.
The 20th is today.
Yep.
And then I thought, well, do I get a notification? How do I know? How do I know that they verified it? How can I do this? And then trying to set up the bill part of it, because he didn't walk me through it because he couldn't, because there was no vendor to choose. So PRH is now in a drop-down menu as a vendor.
Great.
So when I need to create, I can, it's still a way more confusing of a process than I'm explaining it.
Right.
And I haven't enjoyed it in the day that I've been working with. But then, so I reached out to Simon & Schuster, and I reached out to Hachette to be like, hey, I want to set up ACH payments with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
They've each sent the information. I went to do Simon & Schuster, and first you have to search to see, are they in the system? Oh, there are 3 separate Simon & Schuster listings
Perfect.
in PRH. Great.
Perfect.
But they're just based by city.
Mhm.
Like, okay, well,
Which one do we pay?
the bank, like the information they gave me for their bank, and Simon & Schuster's like, hey, if you are mailing a check, it goes here. If you are overnighting a check, it goes here.
Mhm.
If you're sending it to a bank account, it goes here. I'm like, all right, well, the bank account one is New York. There's one that says New York. So I click that, and that was it.
That's it.
Like, there's nothing to verify that says, hey, this is the right place. Nothing that comes up that says, put in their account information, their routing information.
Because they already deal with them, so they're like, we know where you're going.
But I don't know that it's 100% the right one.
Guess you'll find out.
So, and also there still has to be a verification process.
I think, yeah.
So I have no idea.
Yeah.
And I just got the Hachette information, so I haven't had a chance to work with that yet, but I'm not looking forward to it.
No, I'm sure.
So the moral of the story is that while it is 2025 and we don't use fax machines, and electronic payments should be the norm,
You think?
you would think that it would be on the person performing the service to have the way to get paid.
Yeah.
For example, when people want to pay us, we can take a credit card at the register.
We
They
have
can
to
use
figure
PayPal.
that out. It's not like
Yeah.
it's not like you're going to buy this week's books and we're going to be like, well, how are you going to pay us? Figure that out. Give the money to me somehow. Like, no.
One of my
We get to tell you, like, here are the systems and you can use your credit card or pay cash or whatever.
one of my standard joke lines when somebody says, "Oh, do you take Google Pay?"
Mhm.
I say, "Yes, we want to make it as easy as possible for you to give us your money.
Mm-hmm. We'll even take.
Oh, I wasn't. Yeah, we'll even take a gym sock full of quarters.
Thank you, Patrick.
But a washed gym sock.
Give people listening to the podcast the full experience.
Yeah. The gym sock full of quarters line does come up often.
It does.
And I used it at the bank yesterday.
I'm not surprised.
But that's the point is we will go out of our way to make sure you can pay us.
Sure.
These other companies don't.
Yeah.
How is Penguin Random House
they make it
the biggest distributor of books in this country, and they still want you to cut them a check?
They make it your problem to pay them. And it's like, I feel like that's why you're not getting paid by as many people.
And a lot of the difficulties I'm experiencing now is trying to set it up on our bank's end. So this is a PNC issue for how many hoops it has jumped through. And like, look,
I've definitely had issues in the past with me personally. I have a PNC personal account trying to connect things to different places. And it's like, oh, if you were using Chase, this is done. PNC, smaller bank, like they have some difficult problems sometimes connecting with different businesses. Like, oh, okay.
Where I used to live, my landlord changed he started using Zelle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Every bank that uses Zelle has different parameters.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I was using PNC. PNC had a limit. You could only do like $1,000 a day.
Mm-hmm.
My rent was more than $1,000.
Yeah.
So I had to explain to my landlord, like, hey, I'm going to pay you over 2 days.
Uh-huh.
I have the money. I cannot send more than $1,000 at once.
Yep.
It'd be $1,000 this day, $250 the next day.
Right.
And it was always like filling out the Zelle form, sending it to this property management company, and this month's rent, part 1 of 2. The next day, part 2 of 2. And it was so frustrating. Now they eventually raised the limit. It doesn't matter. I don't live there anymore.
Yep.
But also there was points where some companies we were dealing with, like, well, you can Zelle us. We can't because PNC didn't let business accounts use Zelle.
Mm-hmm.
They do now.
Right.
They didn't previously. And whenever someone's like, can I pay you via Zelle? Yeah, but then I have to transfer that money from my account to the store.
It's a hassle.
Which, fine, it's not that hard to do. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you've logged into your bank account recently. In fact, I'm pretty sure you haven't. They've changed the design of
I was
just today.
Okay, because I'm like, I was in my bank account 2 days ago, I think.
Just today. Because I was doing all the stuff last night. Today I log in, I'm like, what is wrong?
Uh-huh. Where did it go?
And you can you can make it look the way you want it to, but it's an extra button click.
Okay.
It's view detail. I don't like it.
Mm.
I don't like it at all. I also don't like that the pending charges is only like 5. And then click to the next screen, the next 5. I'm like, we're a business. We have way more pending charges than 5 in a day.
Yeah.
It's, and I'm sure people listening will be like, oh, well, you should use Chase. You should use Capital One. You should use whatever bank.
Yeah.
PNC works for us. There's locations all around the store.
Yeah. There's 2 very, very close to us.
Yeah. 3 if you count the other Armitage one.
I don't.
There's one on California in Armitage.
I don't count that one.
Okay. Because when one of them is out of quarters, I have to go to the other one to get quarters. One of the things I don't like now is that whenever you go into the bank, that's an automatic $12 fee.
Whoa. Really?
Maybe it's because we're getting change or whatever, but
Jesus.
yeah, they've all...
That's
yeah.
high. It's really
I know.
high.
That's why I try never to go to the bank.
Sure.
When all of our deposits are done electronically.
Yeah, of course.
And that's nothing. There's no fees to that.
Yeah, just go to the ATM. Yeah.
But when you go into the bank, like, why is there something? And also it's random. Like, this is something I should look into. But like our third account that we rarely use for anything, that'll be the one that has fees.
Interesting.
We don't use that
I
account.
wonder why.
Like, did it fall below a minimum?
Maybe.
I don't think so. I don't know. Maybe. It's frustrating. You find out what the fees are at the beginning of each month when you get those deducted from your account automatically. Why do we say PNC? No, we like PNC. It's fine.
PNC.
Yeah. I also never signed up for checks for my personal account when we switch over because who needs a check nowadays?
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Previously, my landlord, before he switched to Zelle, and then Penguin Random House and Simon & Schuster.
Yep, that's it.
Wonderful. All right. Well, that was the majority of the actual business aspect of this podcast.
Sure.
And last week we had said, there might be some ComicsPRO news because ComicsPRO is happening right now, this second,
California.
in Glendale, California. But it just started today.
Right.
So there was a breakfast and there were opening remarks. And since we're not there in person, we paid for the online version of it, which means they are streaming and broadcasting and whatnot.
Sure.
So I got to my computer at 11 a.m. our time because it started at 9 a.m. their time for the very first, for the opening remarks and then for the Marvel presentation. And there were technical difficulties, and by the time they got them resolved, Marvel was over, and they moved on to smaller publishers. So I never got the Marvel information.
Okay. The one piece of Marvel information that went out across a lot of different websites today was the announcement of the brand new Captain America series. It's going to be starting in July. The currently running Sam Wilson Captain America was a 5-issue series that will be concluded in like a month or two.
And the J.M. Straczynski
had ended before that.
Yeah. Steve Rogers series.
So nothing is overlapped. It's just been from one series to another. So the new series, Captain America #1, coming out in July. It is written by Chip Zdarsky. It is drawn by Valerio Schiti, formerly of Gods and Avengers. And it is, at least for the first storyline, maybe the series, taking place in the past. It is after Steve Rogers has been thawed out of the ice in the modern day, but before he's really joining the Avengers. So it's going to be Cap experiencing the modern world from like a real day one setting. So that should be pretty fun.
So different than the Mark Waid and Brian Hitch version.
Yeah, I assume that they're going to be doing some slightly different stuff.
You always need to update Captain America because the longer time goes on, the later he comes out of the ice.
Yeah, like one of the big changes for Living Legend, I think, was based on the shifting timeline, because the Marvel Universe basically is about 10 years old, and they usually count from Fantastic Four's debut. So stuff like Captain America fighting in World War II is fixed in time, but the amount of time Cap has spent in the ice has grown over time. When he first came out of the ice in 1963 or 64, it was like, oh, it's been 20 years. So like almost all of his, like Nick Fury was just older Nick Fury.
Yeah.
Like now when they do Cap comes out of the ice stories, it's like it's been like 80 years. So everyone's dead. One of the big changes, I think, for Living Legend, I think that's what it was called, was that now Cap has come out of the ice post 9/11. Was like the big shift of like, oh, yeah. Like he's coming out into that world. So yeah, now technically Cap came out of the ice in like 2016.
Challengers already existed.
Yeah. Like I don't know if Chip Zdarsky is going to do it, and they're not going to set it in a real specific year, but I think there's a real version of Cap comes out of the ice in early 2017.
Wow.
That you can tell a real specific kind of story that I don't think they're going to do.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's going to do that in 2025, but could be real fun.
Yikes. ComicsPRO,
that's a real, like, I think Cap coming out of the ice in 2017 would be like a real Planet of the Apes ending. You know what I mean?
You did it. You finally did it. Oh, man.
Now I'm going to pitch that to Marvel.
Both from the standpoint of a Canadian.
They're never going to make that story.
And Canadians hate us now.
Uh-huh.
And rightfully so.
Maybe that's what the book's going to be. Like Chip Zdarsky is going to have to do a lot of press up like, look, I'm not the Canadian that hates America.
The point of the ComicsPRO annual meeting, to me, is not for publishers to get up and talk about their upcoming books.
People who don't know what ComicsPRO is or how it works. I mean, ComicsPRO is an organization that exists for the comics.
The comics professional retail organization.
Patrick has served on the board before.
That's true. I was a board member.
And once a year, they do the ComicsPRO annual meeting. And what it is a lot of structured stuff where different publishers and participating sponsors do little presentations for the attending retailers. There's also work sessions and breakout groups as different retailers host little things talking about, things they've done for their store, things that other retailers can use to further their business goals.
Things that are thrown on board members at the last second, like, oh, what are you going to talk about?
Yeah, little roundtables and stuff. And, it's a chance for retailers to not only learn from other retailers, but also to make connections in the comics industry. You know, it's easier than ever before to meet other retailers due to social networking, but this is a way to kind of meet in person and maybe learn from people that you wouldn't normally talk to or you wouldn't normally know about. That's kind of the day portion. And then the night portion is all of the socializing. You know, the day's programming might end at like 4 or 5 o'clock. And then it's like, now what? And Patrick is more interested in the now what portion.
Well, no, that's not what I was going to say.
I mean, I think it's true though.
What I want coming out of the meeting is not what is a publisher going to put out, but I want it to be what is a publisher doing? Like, what are the broad strokes for the industry? What are sales initiatives? What
is your
like
publishing ideology? Who are you reaching? How are you going to reach them?
What's the business part of this? But also,
how are you
like,
as a publisher going to grow my
what
business?
are retailers as a unit doing for the future?
Sure.
Like, I don't just want to know that Chip Zdarsky is doing a Captain America book, which of course I'm very excited for.
Sure. I would argue that it's probably not going to do super great based on how Batman's been doing, but I think it's going to do substantially better than the last 2 Captain America books. So it's
probably combined.
Yeah, probably. Well, what's 99% plus 1%? The thing that we usually complain about when it comes to retailer summits and any sort of presentation by publishers is, and this is, you know, outdated now, but the thing was always, don't just read to me out of previews. Do not just read solicitations for stuff that you already gave me catalog solicitations for. I don't need you to tell me what's in the catalog. I get the catalog. I read the catalog. I order from the catalog. This is not a valuable use of your time. What's more valuable is to tell me how you're going to sell those books. How are you as a publisher reaching out to your potential customers to get them to come into my store and buy these comic books? Who is the target demographic of these things? How are you going to activate them? Because that is like the bigger problem in every media right now is how do you tell people about something that then makes them want to engage with it?
Yeah.
Nobody knows that. I was reading an article where Maya Hawke was on a podcast and she was talking about how basically producers have told her that you have to have a movie to get financed, to get the studio to sign off on it, needs a certain total number of social media followers for its cast. So they have to,
I have heard that.
They have to break that down. If the cast needs 200 million followers and you as an actor are only contributing 5 million, well, they're going to have to figure out a way to build that up with other people. And they might have to cast people that you might not want to see in those parts to get the total up. So celebrities are kind of unable to opt out of social media because that's how they're going to keep their jobs.
Because we all know 100%, if you follow a celebrity on Instagram, you're going to see every movie they're in.
Yeah. And so
it's so stupid.
And it's so dumb. But, and that had already been said about the book industry for years is, you know, you get a book deal and it's like, okay, well, how are you the author going to sell this book? Because the publisher has basically given up. And that's the thing that I always want to hear from people at retailer meetings is not just like, we got a book coming out and it's great. Like, okay, but that doesn't matter if nobody knows about it. You know, I know what I can do internally for that as far as like marketing to my customers and trying to get people who I think would be into it to check it out at the register. But how are you going to get people who would be interested in it, who don't shop at my store, to come to my store and buy it?
But also, I don't care how the author's going to do that.
Right.
I don't think that's their job.
Yeah. I mean, if the author's going to do it, that's great.
Yeah.
Like, you know, Rainbow Rowell telling all of her people, like, I'm doing this thing is great.
It's fantastic.
But it shouldn't be Rainbow Rowell's job to sell Marvel comics to her fans.
Right.
That should be Marvel's job.
Yeah.
You know, an adjunct of that is when they get to the store, how are you going to make it easier for me to make sure the book is waiting for them there? And it's usually things like some sort of sales incentive, like returnability, overships.
Oh my God, Dow talks about returnability. Cross it off on
your bingo card. The bundles that DC's doing have been really good. We don't qualify for all of them based on certain books. The Image ones, I think we've had the toughest time with because it seems like every tie-in is either a book that sells 5 times what we're expecting this book to sell, or they pick a book where it's like, well, shit, yeah, we ordered a lot of copies of The Moon is Following Us because we have a huge Dan Johnson
following
fandom in our store. And so we're probably going to order less of this other book that we're sort of excited about because we just don't have as many natural fans for that creator. We got boned on that. But, making Absolute Flash tied into Justice League Unlimited #2 is substantially easier for us to hit. Like, we're going to have a bunch of copies of Absolute Flash #1 because of it. Also, I read Absolute Flash #1, and I thought it was really good.
Nice.
I don't know if it's a book that I can as easily pitch. It's like sci-fi YA stuff.
Okay.
It's a teen Wally West.
Okay. So it's Wally West.
It's Wally West.
Is there a Barry Allen in the book?
I don't want to say. I don't want to give anything away.
Is there a buried alien?
I don't want to say anything. But you're in Wally West's head for this book. It is his perspective on things. And I don't know that I saw enough in issue 1 to get the immediate connection that like Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman were really setting up in issue 1. Like, oh, here's what we're talking about and here's how it's different.
Yeah, you can give their premises in a sentence.
Yeah. Flash didn't make itself immediately clear to me, but it is very good sci-fi YA stuff. It is, Nick Robles' art is real good. Jeff Lemire's writing is real good. There's enough cool mystery stuff that they give
I think what we're going to find out is that Iris West Allen is still alive.
What?
They just got divorced.
What?
That's an inside joke. Don't anyone pay any attention to that.
That's nothing to do with the book. Absolute Flash #1 was good, though. And DC is making it easier for us to get behind it. That was a huge success for us, at least of the Absolute line, is that they made our buy-in on it so easy to do that we could stock very heavily, and then we went and sold out of multiple printings of Absolute Batman #1 and Absolute Wonder Woman #1, which would not have happened. I mean, it would have happened at a much lower number if we had not been given the opportunity to get copies at a decent price so that we could stock up on it. So yeah, publishers doing stuff like that. The thing I don't need to know about is that the book is good. Like, 1, I'll decide that for myself. 2, I'm never going to trust a representative to tell me it's good.
If your representative wants to give me an ash can, great, I'll read it.
Yeah. A rep at a company telling me how much the book moved them and how it's the best pitch they've gotten in years or whatever. Like, this is just sales. I don't need you to sell me in that way. I need you to tell me how it's going to be easier for me to sell it.
But I'm looking for industry news, and by that I mean, is anybody else leaving Diamond? Has Dynamite, in fact, found a different distributor?
The one remaining big publisher at Diamond.
I want the broad strokes of what's happening in the industry as a whole.
Sure.
And
you want the temperature of the room, basically. You want to talk to a bunch of retailers because, again, like, people complain about stuff.
And you're right, a lot
online.
of that stuff would happen one-on-one at night, talking to people.
Yeah, it's going to happen at some local restaurant when everyone's relaxing for the day, not in the middle, whispering to each other during
one of the problems is that everybody now is having competing offsite events afterwards.
Activation.
Oh, are you going to the distillery dinner, or are you going to the Managed Comics dinner, or are you going to one of the publisher, I can't remember their name. They've got a Bill Sienkiewicz book coming out, and I watched their whole presentation. Can't remember their name. I want to say it's like Key Comics, but I don't think that's right. They're like, oh, we're having an after party. Everyone's invited, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, man, you've got a lot of after party competition.
Sure.
It's like it's C2E2 at night. There's so much stuff to do.
Well, a lot of comics retailers like free drinks. So if you're going to be buying them dinner and buying them drinks, you're probably going to get them to show up.
Probably. So at this point in the ComicsPRO day weekend, there's no industry news like that.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Or maybe stuff has happened. I don't know. I was unavailable for half the day. I watched all the presentations up till their lunch, and then I moved out my day.
Yeah, and I mean, the stuff that I was reading was just stuff that's been reported, and a lot of that is just going to be press releases that are being put out in conjunction with presentations at ComicsPRO. Yeah. And not all that stuff is going to get press releases right now. Some of it might have been for the room, and then the press will find out in a few days.
Right. We're not here to say, oh, there's a new Robert Kirkman book that he's not writing.
Benito Cereno, yeah.
Yeah. Blood and Thunder. Uh-huh. Her nickname is Blood. Her gun is called Thunder.
Yeah, I mean, it looks cute, but it's also not going to sell great. I don't know that, idea by Robert Kirkman means as much as it used to.
It's an idea he's had since he was a kid, though, Dow.
Fine. Again, the book looks fun. I'm going to read it. But, we've had...
And also, I don't know that was, that press release came out today. I don't know if it was specifically a ComicsPRO.
I don't know. I mean, there's there's new catalogs coming out.
Yeah.
Within the next few days. So a lot of announcements that are coming out are just things that will be in the next catalog anyway.
Yeah.
So they're getting in front of that. Retailers are going to start finding out as they get their DC catalog, their Image catalog, their Marvel catalog, their IDW catalog.
I was going to end on this, but maybe we just hold it till next week.
Sure, why not? It's not topical.
It's not topical and it's not a huge thing,
No.
but we'll just I'll leave it in the podcastatorium
For sure.
Yeah, and hopefully by then I'll have read some of the DC books that
Maybe.
are up online. Probably not, though.
Probably not.
Thanks for listening.
And keep reading comics.
This has been Contest of Challengers. Thanks for listening. Keep reading comics. Challengers is located at 1845 Northwestern Avenue in the Bucktown neighborhood of Chicago. 773-278-0155. Keep up to date with new releases and events at challengerscomics.com. And help fund this podcast at patreon.com/challengers.